also for understanding her approach to the question of what is called thinking. I understand in Avital's seminar you're actually looking at this particular piece by Heidegger, what is called thinking. How many of you are in Avital's morning? So then, it's probably important to note that Arendt grew up as a Jew in Germany. Her first publications were in the early 1930s, and they had to do with what it meant to be a Jew in Germany. Her early writing was itself, her first major work, in fact, was a biography of Rachel Varnhagen, a not entirely successful piece of writing that sought to understand the formation of a German Jewish woman writer in the context of German cosmopolitan culture. So many people take this early piece to be a kind of autobiography in the form of a biography. What was Arendt trying to find out about her own formation, or how was her own formation like the formation of Rachel Varnhagen? It's interesting that this was a text that Arendt began to write in the early 1930s in Berlin, and then took with her to Paris when she had to flee Germany, and she completed it there in Europe before her move to New York City in the early 1940s. The book is in some ways a critique of assimilationism, and it even ends up with a chapter entitled "One Does Not Escape Jewishness." And of course this term Jewishness is kind of interesting. It's not that one does not escape Judaism, the religion, and it's not even one does not escape being a Jew, it's Jewishness. Even there, she does not quite identify what Jewishness is, and she's working something out. Is it a quality? Is it a religion? Is it a cultural identity? What is it? She doesn't say Jewishness is Judaism. She doesn't say it's a religion. She does not say it is Zionism, understood as political Zionism. What seems most important at that time was that for Arendt, this biography was a way to tell a story about a life that was in some ways like her own, but not in all ways. It predates her own by several decades. It was also very, very clearly a defense of a certain version of cosmopolitanism, a position that I think she never really abandoned. She considered the role of the salon. Varnhagen ran a salon, was an active member of a salon, in the formation of modes of belonging and ways of thinking. And in this way, she was interested in understanding those social forms in which lives are crafted and modes of thought are articulated. And they're social forms in the sense that they're forms of life that are lived together. They are lived with others. They're modes of social interaction or exchange. Now, in those same years, she published several essays on Jewish politics. She engaged an early interest in a certain version of Zionism, what is sometimes called cultural Zionism, as opposed to political Zionism. And in particular, she was interested in the romantic socialist Zionism of Martin Buber and the Brit Shalom movement, which we can talk about if that kind of thing interests you. And basically, there were open debates through the 1930s and indeed through the 1940s on whether cultural Zionism, which involved the affirmation of Jewish community or Jewish spirituality or sometimes even Jewish nationality, implied political Zionism, which was a commitment to a state that would be based on Jewish membership or Jewish citizenship. And Arendt was always interested in cultural Zionism. There were times in the 1930s when she was writing journalistic, and she continued actually writing journalism through Eichmann in Jerusalem, so good 30 years of journalism there, where she considered political Zionism, but for the most part, she believed in binationalism for the lands of Palestine. She thought Jews and non-Jews should live together, and she thought it was a mistake to have citizenship based on religion. She thought that not only in the 30s, but she also thought it in 1946, 1947, and 1948. So the rise of German fascism, the concentration camps, the destruction of over 6 million Jews did not change her views on political Zionism. In fact, she became more emphatic that it would be an error to base a state on that, on a religious identity. And she thought that if one were to do that, it could only produce exclusions, displacements, refugees, and continuing conflicts, she said, for generations to come. Thank you, Anna. Okay. As German fascism became stronger and more catastrophic in the 30s and 40s, she wrote extensively on anti-Semitism, and she considered arguments in favor of a Jewish army in Europe.
Can I quickly ask, we may be getting into this later and you can ignore it if so, but was there a historical model that she was basing this on, or was it just like an intuitive feeling? This idea that
Of binationalism?
Or of religion being, of a state based on religion being a source of eternal conflict. Because obviously it hadn't happened in Ireland yet.
Actually, what she thought was that a state based on a homogeneous nation would be a mistake. So, in fact, in the larger book on the origins of totalitarianism, she goes even further and makes the claim that what we need to do is sever the nation from the state. That nation states, hyphenated, produce massive displacements of populations, massive refugees, because they seek to base a state on a singular or homogeneous notion of the people. Religion is one way of making a nation. And of course, one of the interesting problems in thinking about what Jewishness is that, as she found, as she wrote some very longish essays on this problem, is that the very idea of Jewishness tends to vacillate between religion and nation.
Again, was there a historical model for that she was basing it on, or was it just an intuitive?
Well, she was actually, at the time that she wrote on the origins of totalitarianism, she was tracking the expulsion of people from various Eastern European nations that were trying to establish nation states. So she was thinking about pogroms, but she also actually had a brief analysis of the partition in India and Pakistan, so she had several precedents, but she also wanted to say that something was happening in the mid-20th century that was also without precedent. So it might be important to mark that as well. Well, anyway, she made a kind of wild claim about there should be a Jewish army in Europe. And so she was no pacifist, clearly. She considered whether Jewishness was necessarily a religious identity, and she sought to reconcile her continuing commitments to European intellectual life, especially German intellectual life, with her persistent opposition to German fascism and anti-Semitism. So it became, in fact, extremely important for her to be able to distinguish German intellectual traditions from fascism, and she resisted all efforts to say that fascism was somehow there, inherent in all German intellectual traditions, or even in German idealism, or other philosophical trends. Now, I'm going to return to these points in a moment, and though I'm giving you something of a history, a kind of episodic history, you'll see that certain kinds of major intellectual questions emerge out of this situation. And let me make 3 points with respect to this question of German Jewishness.